So I have a question for you that might seem a little odd. What does a water main have to do with Labor Day? What does a water main have to do with Labor Day? Well, hopefully we'll figure that out later. But on our drive home on Wednesday night, Marcia and I noticed that there's some MPW trucks that were near our house, and a nearby parking lot was kind of flooded, had a whole bunch of water on it. And when we got home, we turned on the tap, and the water was discolored, and there was air in the line as a result of some sort of a water main issue. It took a couple of hours until the problem was fixed, but we didn't want to drink water from that faucet until it cleared, and we ran the water from various faucets in our house to clear out the pipes. So just hold on to that little story, because we'll come back to it in just a little bit. So the reading today from Jeremiah opens with a dialogue between God and Jeremiah. And not Jeremiah the prophet to the people, but between God and Jeremiah. The first verse is God asking Jeremiah about the hearts of the Hebrew people, because God proclaims here, "What wrong did your ancestors find in me that they went far from me?" What wrong did your ancestors find in me that they went far from me? Now, to me, that sounds like a parent that's kind of at the end of their rope. It's like the anguished parent who loves their children and cannot understand why they're making the choices that they're making, and might be a little self-destructive. Throughout the book of Jeremiah, we see a prophet wondering and warning the people that they have walked away from God. And we know that destructive choices usually have unfortunate consequences. The second verse that caught my eye in this particular reading says, "I brought you into a plentiful land to eat its fruits and good things, but when you entered, you defiled my land and made my heritage an abomination." The land of Canaan is supposed to be a land of milk and honey, a good land with enough for all the people there. But maybe the people think, "Oh, that's too good to be true," or maybe they've forgotten God's promise. Either way, there is a lack of trust in God. And the people during Jeremiah's time were turning away from God and turning to idols. And maybe they're thinking, "Well, this is a way to hedge our bets, just in case this God guy isn't what we want. Well, we got these little statues that we can worship, because that's what other people do." And so maybe they're hedging their bets a little bit. And the archaeological evidence we have suggests that the Hebrew people were possibly participating in the worship of fertility gods, such as Baal, that we heard about in the reading, which may have included possibly even the practice of child sacrifice in exchange for the hope of good crops and blessings. And with each child lost, the people weakened their community. And Jeremiah is a prophet warning about broken trust. He is not particularly good at persuading people, but his labor is worthy and his motives are just. Throughout the book of Jeremiah, we hear the groanings and labor of a man who is tasked with talking to people and calling them to examine their choices. He reminds them of what God desires, which is mercy, including welcoming others, caring about their community, and not focusing totally on themselves. His work is the labor we all do when we build connections with each other. But the Hebrew people as a whole have strayed so far that they have forgotten the gifts that they have been given. And, okay, this is the part where the water main comes back in. We understand that the water we drink needs to be clear and clean. I think everybody knows that. You know, you should drink something clear and clean, and maybe not something that comes a cup directly out of the Mississippi River. You know, it needs to be clear, it needs to be clean. Drinking from a broken water main will sometimes let in impurities, and it'll let in bacteria. Now, while the people in Canaan didn't have water pipes, they did have ground containers designed to hold water. That's what a cistern is. And maybe some of you have grown up in places that had cisterns for various reasons. And drinking from a broken cistern was like drinking from a broken water main. That there might be some stuff in there that is not good. And the image in the reading is about the ways we can sabotage ourselves and sabotage others by consuming things that lead to harm. And that consumption may not be something that you eat or you do, but it may be the way you act, consuming things that way. So think of your own labor, both personally and spiritually. Do you labor for answers to your questions and long for the living water and the peace that comes from a life that is faithful to the love of God? Are you looking for that living water that comes from God, from a loving God? The metaphor of the cracked cistern, or maybe in our case a broken water main, tells us that we are clinging to behaviors contaminated with things that can hurt us. Now, labor in our lives means choosing a vocation, choosing a job or a vocation, and being strong enough to stand up when we're asked to do things that we shouldn't do, things that maybe are immoral or amoral or things that just aren't right because they may hurt people. That you need to be strong enough to do that. And this helps Jeremiah's metaphor come to life. From the very beginning of Genesis, human beings are invited to tend the garden, to shape and steward the gifts of creation, and to use the fruits of that labor for the good of all, for the good of everyone. And the Episcopal Church has long affirmed that labor is a form of vocation, no matter what you do. A calling through which God's image in us is expressed. Whether we are employed in offices or factories, farms or homes, schools or anywhere in the community, our work, whatever that work is meant to draw from the living waters of God's presence. But we also know, I think all of us know, I know, that how easy it is for labor to become disconnected from its holy source. Faith purified with the promises of our baptismal covenant keeps us strong. And Paul in the Hebrews reading today reminds us to show hospitality, helping those imprisoned unjustly, and tending those who are grieving from violence and its aftermath. And we live in a time where personal gain and prosperity are often seen as the means to an end. But that labor ignores the gifts of others to us. Faith and also work can become a broken cistern when pursued only for ourselves. Jeremiah's warning to Israel echoes for us today. When we turn our spiritual and financial labor into an idol of money and status and things and other stuff, we turn away from what God hopes for us. And I hope that we can drink from the fountain of that living water, and we can live abundantly and hold on to hope during this Labor Day weekend. Because God calls us to labor faithfully, not just for ourselves, but for the good of the community. Whatever we do can and should be a vocation, a way to show God's image is in each one of us. Labor faithfully, love abundantly, and draw that sweet, sweet living water as you go forward in this life. Amen.